Hey there, welcome to the Healthy Mind channel, where I share true stories packed with surprising turns. If you like what you hear in this video, please hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. It really helps keep our little corner of YouTube growing. Alright, let's jump into the story. Yo, I'm Steve, 25 years old, living just on the edge of Edmonds, Washington. Not a big city dude, but near enough to keep things lively. I'm an electrician, not some wannabe swinging a hammer without a clue. I went to trade school, got my certification, and now I work for a small local outfit called Puget Sound Electric. We're not some giant corporation, but we've got a steady flow of jobs. Most days, I handle 2 or 3 service calls, which keeps the bills paid, lets me stash a little cash, and fuels my dream of starting my own company one day. That morning started like any other. 2 gigs lined up, nothing wild. First up was a simple job at an office building, just a busted wall outlet that needed a quick fix. Then dispatch hit me up with another call. A lady just outside town was having issues with her garage lights flickering on and off for no reason. It wasn't an emergency, but she wanted it sorted ASAP, so I plugged the address into my GPS and took off. The place was tucked away off the main road in a quiet, upscale neighborhood with big, pristine houses and perfectly mowed lawns. When I pulled up to her property, I hit the brakes for a second to take it in. A sleek, modern 2-story home with a wide driveway and a fancy black gate already swung open for me. This wasn't the usual kind of spot I get called to. It screamed money. I parked, grabbed my toolbox, and headed up the driveway toward the garage. As I got close to the side entrance, the door swung open, and out stepped this tall woman, maybe 30 or 32, with long dark hair tied back loosely in a ponytail, dressed in jeans and a fitted tee. It wasn't just her looks. She had this confident, almost graceful vibe, like she owned the place in more ways than one. She glanced at me briefly before her eyes flicked back to her phone. "You're here to fix the garage lights?" she asked, her voice flat, no warmth. "Yup. I'm Steve with Puget Sound Electric," I said. "You mentioned the lights keep flickering?" She gave a quick nod and pointed toward the garage. "They cut out every time I open the door. Sometimes they come back on, sometimes they don't. It's driving me nuts." "Got it. I'll check it out," I told her. She didn't say another word, just turned and disappeared back into the house through the garage's interior door. I set my toolbox down and got to work. The problem was pretty clear. Shoddy wiring on an old motion sensor, installed by someone who clearly half-assed it. I killed the power, yanked out the old unit, tidied up the wiring, and put in a new, proper motion sensor with updated housing. The whole job took about 3 hours, including testing to make sure it was solid. The entire time, I didn't hear a peep from her. No chit-chat, no popping in to check on me, just dead silence. When I was done, I packed up, flipped the breaker back on, and tested the lights a few more times. Worked like a charm. I knocked on the interior door and waited. A few seconds later, she came back out, this time without her phone. She walked right up, watched the lights flick on perfectly with the motion sensor, and gave a small smile. "Well, about time," she said. "They're actually working right now." "Yup," I said, nodding. It was a wiring mess. I swapped out the sensor too, just to be safe. "You're all set now." She crossed her arms, tilted her head a bit, and looked at me. "You're pretty good at this." "Thanks." I smiled, genuinely appreciating the compliment. Then, out of nowhere, she hit me with, "You're kinda handsome, you know?" I froze, totally caught off guard. Thanks," I said, letting out a nervous chuckle. Her smile shifted. It wasn't snarky or fake. It felt real. Then she leaned against the doorframe and said, "So, Steve, what do you do when you're not fixing stuff?" I was thrown again. I mean, I've had friendly customers before, but this was different. She was different. "Honestly, not a ton," I admitted. "Work keeps me busy. I'm not big on partying or going out. I'm more into chill nights and early mornings." She nodded slowly, like she got it. "That's kinda refreshing. I'm not huge on the social scene either." That surprised me. She looked like someone who'd be at some fancy club or sailing on a yacht, not staying in on a Saturday night. But the way she said it felt genuine, not like she was feeding me a line. People assume a lot when you look a certain way, she went on. It gets old fast. I nodded, not sure how to respond. Then she dropped another bomb. This is totally out of left field, but you want to hang out this weekend? My brain stalled for a second. Hang out? I asked just to make sure I heard her right. She smiled again. Yeah, you and me, somewhere nice, somewhere low-key. No pressure, you don't have to decide now. I paused for a beat, then said, you know what? I'd like that. Her smile grew just a touch. Cool. I'll text you the details. Thanks again for fixing the lights. And with that, she turned and walked back into the house, leaving me standing there like I just wandered into some alternate universe. I got in my truck, shut the door, and just sat there for a minute, trying to process what the hell just happened. The rest of the day felt like I was half asleep, going through the motions. I drove to my next job, fixed a broken outlet at some guy's workshop, made the usual small talk, but my brain was elsewhere. I kept checking my phone every 20 minutes like a total nutcase, expecting a text or call, but nothing, just radio silence. I realized I didn't even know her name. I'd done the whole job like a pro, never asking, and then she hit me with that curveball at the end. Wanna hang out this weekend? And I just said yes, like it was no big deal. By the time Friday rolled around, still nothing. I started thinking maybe she was just being nice, or maybe it was some rich person prank, something to giggle about with her friends later. Can you believe I asked out my electrician? I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. People say weird stuff all the time, right? But then, around noon on Friday, my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Helen from the lights. Still good for Saturday? I'll pick you up at noon. Drop a pin. My stomach did a flip, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Helen, now I had a name. She hadn't forgotten. I didn't overthink it. I sent her a pin for a public parking lot near a hardware store, not too far from my place, keeping it simple. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Saturday morning, I was up way too early, trying on 3 different shirts that were basically identical, cleaning my shoes like a maniac, and even shaving, which I don't always bother with. I don't usually shave on weekends, but that morning I felt like I needed to step up my game, still keeping it real but a little sharper. By the time I reached the parking lot, it was barely 11:40, and I plopped down on the curb, pretending to mess around on my phone while sneaking glances at every car pulling in. Right at 14:04, I heard this deep, throaty engine roar, and I looked up to see her rolling in behind the wheel of a silver Aston Martin Vantage. Top down, sunglasses on, her loose hair dancing in the wind like something straight out of a Hollywood flick. I swear, every person in that lot turned to stare at her, then at me standing there like some dude waiting for a pizza delivery. She gave a quick wave and called out, "Steve!" I nodded back, trying to play it cool, and slid into the passenger seat. The seats were this soft, luxurious leather, like something you'd see in a car ad, and she smelled like fresh citrus mixed with some fancy perfume I couldn't pin down. As we hit the highway, I finally worked up the nerve to ask, "So, where are we headed?" "There's this spot I go to when I need to get away from it all," she said, her voice calm but confident. "You're gonna love it, I swear." We drove for about 45 minutes, cruising through rolling hills and thick forests before turning onto narrower roads. Eventually, she veered onto a gravel path that wound toward a wooded area, and I started hearing the sound of rushing water before I could see anything. She parked, and we hiked a short trail, maybe 5 minutes, until the trees opened up to reveal a small waterfall cascading into a clear pool, surrounded by smooth rocks and towering trees that seemed to touch the sky. The place was stunning, peaceful yet powerful, and I couldn't help but stare. I glanced over at her. She wasn't smiling, but she looked serene, completely at ease. "This spot," she said quietly, "it makes me feel small, but in the best way possible." We settled on a flat rock just out of reach of the waterfall's mist, and she kicked off her sandals, dipping her toes into the icy water. I did the same, wincing at how cold it was but loving the refreshing bite. She stared out at the water and said, "I bet I know what's going through your head." "Oh yeah," I replied, unsure where this was going. You're probably wondering why someone like me dragged someone like you out here. She nailed it, but I didn't say anything, mostly because I didn't know how to respond. She kept her gaze on the water and continued. My dad runs a huge logistics company, and my mom's in charge of their HR department. Our house was paid off before I was even 6. Fancy cars, private schools, all the connections you could want. I stayed quiet, letting her talk. But growing up, everyone saw me as a stereotype, the rich girl, the perfect one. Guys chased the idea of me. Girls either wanted to be me or couldn't stand me. I never felt like anyone really saw me. I nodded, still processing, and she added, until I met someone who didn't know my last name. You mean me? I asked, cautious. She gave a small nod. You didn't pry into my life, didn't try to show off. You just did your job, said thanks, and left. That's rare. You were just you. I wasn't sure what to say, so I went with the truth. I thought maybe you were just messing with me, like it was some kind of prank. She finally turned to look at me, her eyes steady. I get why you'd think that, but I wasn't. A quiet pause settled between us. Not weird, just thoughtful. Then she flashed a slight smile. I'm not looking for anything heavy. I just wanted to hang out with someone who doesn't expect anything from me. No strings attached, I said, getting it. Exactly, she replied, nodding. Thanks. We sat there for about an hour, chatting, laughing a bit, swapping silly stories from our lives. It was the most at ease I'd felt in forever. As the sun started to sink, she stood up, brushing gravel off her jeans. Time to head back. Yeah, I said, standing too. But I'm really glad I came. The drive back was quiet, but it was a comfortable kind of silence. No music, just the hum of the road and the wind whipping past. She dropped me off right where she'd picked me up, and I reached for the door but paused, turning to her. Am I gonna see you again? She didn't answer right away, then said, maybe, if you give me a call. I stepped out, shut the door, and watched her Porsche disappear down the road. As soon as she was gone, it hit me. That wasn't really a date, but it was more than just some random hangout. Felt like the start of something, though I had no clue what. The days after that trip felt different. I was still doing my usual electrician gigs, swapping out sockets, fixing panels, resetting tripped fuses, but I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. Helen was stuck in my head, not in a loud, in-your-face way, but like a soft song playing in the background that I couldn't turn off. The weird thing, she hadn't texted, not once. I wasn't expecting her to blow up my phone or anything, but after how open she was at the waterfall, how real she'd been, I figured there'd be something. A quick, that was fun, or even a random meme. But nope, just silence. I started second-guessing myself. Maybe she just needed a one-time listener, someone safe to vent to because I wasn't part of her world. Maybe that was the whole point. But something kept me from letting it go. Maybe the way she looked at me before I got out of her car, or how she said, maybe if you call me, like she was handing me the reins and walking away. So, the next Friday, I was sitting in my truck outside a hardware store, sipping terrible coffee and trying to convince myself I wasn't nervous. I pulled out my phone, tapped her name, and called. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, she said, her voice warm, like we just talked yesterday. Hey, it's Steve, I said, feeling a little dumb for stating the obvious. I know, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I was hoping you'd call. I let out a slow breath, realizing how tense I'd been. You want to hang out again? I asked. This time, I'll plan something. There was a brief pause. Then she said, I'd like that. We agreed on Sunday afternoon, and I told her I'd pick her up. She didn't ask where we were going, just said, all right, I'll be ready. I had no idea what someone like Helen might expect from a second hangout, but I knew I wanted it to be genuine. Not some fancy restaurant or over-the-top spot, just something real. So I planned a picnic like a legit one. I borrowed a blanket from my mom, packed sandwiches, some fruit, and a couple of glass-bottled lemonades, even splurging on a small cooler to keep it all fresh. Then I went online and rented a car. Nothing crazy, just a clean silver 2018 Chevrolet. Not too flashy but not a junker either. Sunday afternoon, I pulled up to her house, that same massive place with the wide driveway and sleek glass windows. She was already waiting on the front steps, dressed in a soft blue hoodie and black leggings. No makeup, no sunglasses, no Porsche in sight. She walked over, flashed a grin, and slid into the passenger seat. "Hey, picnic boy," she said, teasing. I laughed. "Ready for a surprise?" "Always," she replied, buckling in. We drove about 40 minutes out of town to a spot I'd picked out. When I was a kid, my dad used to take me to this wide-open clearing near a thick oak forest, where you could see rolling hills and a sky so big it made you realize how noisy your everyday life is. We parked under a cluster of trees, hauled out the picnic stuff, and laid the blanket across the soft grass. I poured lemonade into some plastic cups while Helen sat cross-legged, her eyes fixed on the clouds drifting above. "I can't even remember the last time I did anything like this," she said, her voice soft. "Not just a picnic, but something that doesn't feel staged or filtered for social media." She paused for a moment, then added, "This feels real, you know? We spent a while just chilling, munching on sandwiches, cracking up at my pathetic attempt to peel an orange, and chatting about random stuff. Stories from when we were kids, weird clients I dealt with, and our favorite songs. She wasn't putting on a show for me, and I wasn't trying to impress her either. It was like the conversation just flowed naturally. Then there was this quiet moment where she went silent, gazing out at the trees, the sunlight catching her face in this perfect, golden glow. She turned to me slowly and said, "You know what stood out to me about the other day? You didn't look at me like you were after something. Not my money, not my attention, not even some kind of ego boost. You just saw me." Her words hit me hard, and I didn't know how to respond, my throat tightening a bit. Then she leaned in just a fraction, and I met her halfway. Our kiss was gentle, unhurried, like a quiet agreement we didn't need to spell out. When we pulled back, she gave me a soft smile. "I was hoping you'd do that," she said. "I wasn't sure I had it in me," I admitted, chuckling nervously. "You're kinda intimidating, you know?" She laughed, a real warm laugh. "Yeah, I do that on purpose. It keeps the wrong kind of people at a distance." We hung out for another hour, just sprawled on the blanket, watching the tree branches sway in the breeze as the sun sank lower. At one point, she reached over and took my hand, her touch light but deliberate. "I don't know what this thing between us is," she said quietly, "but I'm liking it." "Same here," I said, squeezing her hand gently. On the drive back, we didn't talk much, but it wasn't because we were out of things to say. It was like we didn't need to fill the silence. She didn't ask me to drop her at the gate. I pulled right up to her front door. Before she got out, she turned to me and said, "Text me, okay? Whenever." Then she was gone, and I sat there for a minute, the faint scent of lemon and lavender still hanging in the air. I had no idea what was coming next, but I knew this wasn't just a one-off anymore. The next few days felt different, lighter, like the weight I usually carried wasn't there. I was still doing my electrician gigs, replacing outlets, wiring panels, fixing fuses, but it didn't feel like a slog. The drives between jobs felt less like a grind and more like I was moving toward something. I started texting Helen more. Nothing intense, just real stuff. I'd send something like, "Just rewired a ceiling fan one-handed while holding a flashlight in my teeth." Not bragging, just saying I'm basically a superhero. "Your turn." She'd fire back, "Spilled coffee on my silk blouse in a Zoom meeting with a dozen people." Top that. We'd laugh, swap song recommendations, and send each other dumb photos of clouds we thought looked like animals or objects. It was like we were building something without trying to label it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't quite know where I fit in her world. She was wealthy, gorgeous, confident, and I was just me, a guy in work boots with calloused, stained hands. The idea that she'd pick me over anyone else in her circle felt almost too good to be true. Then, a week after our picnic, she texted me late on a Thursday night. "You free tomorrow evening?" I replied, "Technically free, emotionally unavailable, professionally underpaid." "What's up?" Her response, "Come over. My parents are gone for the week, and I want to show you something." That was the first time she invited me into her actual space. Not just her garage or the front steps, but inside her life. I hesitated for a split second, then typed back, "I'll be there." Friday evening, I showed up in my usual jeans and my cleanest black button-up, the sun casting a warm golden glow across her driveway. The front door was already open, and there she was in the hallway, barefoot, in an oversized knit sweater and leggings, her hair in a messy bun, no makeup, looking completely at ease. "Hey," she said, stepping aside with a small smile. "Come on in." I walked into the foyer, and the house was straight out of a design magazine. High ceilings, glass walls, modern art hanging everywhere, but it didn't feel sterile. It felt warm, like it was truly hers. She led me through the house to the kitchen, where 2 plates were set out on the island, candles flickering softly. "You cooked?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Kinda," she said with a grin. "I ordered from this place I love and reheated it, so I'm calling it semi-homemade." We ate out on the patio under strings of hanging lights, the evening air cool and crisp. She handed me a hoodie, saying it was probably an ex's, and I didn't pry. Our conversation just flowed. She told me about her job in marketing for a startup focused on eco-friendly packaging, and I shared my dream of starting a small repair business that could train young guys who, like me, skipped college for a trade. Then she stood up and said, "Come on, I've got something to show you." She led me upstairs to a room at the end of the hall and opened the door to reveal a small art studio. Canvases leaning against the walls, some half-finished, others bursting with vibrant colors and raw emotion. I was floored. "You paint?" I asked, my voice full of awe. She nodded. "Yeah, but just for myself, not for anyone else." I walked in slowly, taking it all in, and she stood behind me, her voice soft. "This is the one place I feel like me. No makeup, no expectations, no pressure to be anything." I turned to face her. "You should get to feel like that all the time." For a moment, her usual confidence wavered, just a flicker, and she stepped closer. "I don't know what this thing is between us, Steve," she said quietly. "But when I'm with you, I'm not putting on an act. That means something to me." "I don't know what this is either," I admitted. "But you're on my mind all the time." We stood there, surrounded by her paintings, her vulnerability laid bare in every brushstroke, and I kissed her again. This time it felt different. No hesitation, no question marks, just something we both wanted and were starting to trust. Later that night, we ended up on her couch, legs tangled, some old movie playing in the background. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "You're the first person I've let in like this in a long time." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, meaning every word. She smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in it. "Don't say that unless you really mean it." "I do," I said, my voice steady. At some point, we both drifted off on the couch, and I woke up around 2:35 a.m. to the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows. She was still asleep, her hand resting gently on my chest like it was meant to be there, and I didn't dare move, not wanting to break the spell of that quiet moment. I had no clue what the future held, whether the gap between our worlds would grow too wide or if her life might overshadow mine. But for the first time in ages, I didn't feel like just the guy with a toolbox. I felt like someone who mattered. It's been about 4 months since I first showed up at Helen's garage door, and I can still picture it vividly. Her barely glancing at me, her voice sharp and detached, pointing at those faulty lights like I was just another name on her to-do list. For a couple of hours, that's all I was supposed to be. Just the electrician fixing her problem. But somehow, in the middle of untangling wires and fixing a shoddy motion sensor, something unexpected clicked between us. After that night at her place, we kept meeting up. Not every single day, since we both had our own lives, jobs, and routines, but often enough that it started to feel natural, like it was exactly where we were meant to be. Sunday evenings stretched into full weekends. Quick texts turned into long phone calls, and awkward pauses gave way to easy, comfortable silences. There wasn't some big, cinematic moment where everything changed, no dramatic "will you be mine" scene. It just grew steadily, authentically, and I think that's what made it feel so real. But real life comes with complications, and I learned fast that being with someone like Helen brought its own set of challenges. It started with the stares we'd get when we walked into a restaurant, where people seemed to know her. Not because she was famous, but because she belonged to that polished, elite world. They'd look at me like I was the guy who wandered into the wrong room, maybe the help who forgot his place. One night, we went to her friend's engagement party. Everyone decked out in custom suits and cocktail dresses, tossing around words like equity stakes and venture capital. There I was, in my best button-up, nursing a ginger ale since I was driving, trying not to count the seconds until we could leave. Later, in the car, I told her I felt like I didn't belong. She just looked at me, steady and sure, and said, "That's because you're not like them, Steve. And that's exactly why you're here with me." Her words helped, but they didn't erase the unease completely. It wasn't just her world shifting to fit me. Mine was changing too. My boss started noticing I wasn't as focused, and I began passing on extra jobs, not out of laziness, but because I cared more about being with her than racking up overtime. For a guy who's always been defined by his work, that was a big shift. One evening, we were at my place, a small, cluttered apartment that's cozy in its own lived-in way. Helen was perched on my couch, flipping through an old high school yearbook I didn't even realize I still had. "You've built something solid here," she said, her voice warm and sincere. "It's not fancy," I said, shrugging, "but it's home." She glanced around. At the tools piled by the door, the chipped countertop, the thrift store painting hanging crooked on a nail, and said, "I like it." And I could tell she meant it. That night, we talked for hours about where we were at, what we wanted out of life. Not some dreamy, unrealistic stuff, but real, grounded plans. She opened up about wanting to step back from her corporate marketing job, tired of chasing numbers she didn't care about, and maybe starting something smaller, something creative that felt true to her. I shared my goal of finally launching my own repair business, getting a van, branding it, building something that was mine instead of just working for someone else. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "What if we built something together?" I looked at her, surprised. "Like, you and me?" She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yeah, like us." That was 2 months ago, and since then, things have been moving in a good direction. She's been helping me put together a small brand, logo, website, even a basic marketing plan. I'm still out there climbing ladders, fixing outlets, getting paint on my work boots, but now it feels like I'm building toward something, not just patching up other people's problems. We're not rushing anything. We still have our own places, our own mornings, our own quirks and bad habits, but we're choosing each other day after day on purpose, and that choice feels more meaningful than any label we could put on it. Last weekend, we went back to that waterfall, the same spot with the same rocks. This time, we brought coffee and donuts, and I had my arm around her as she leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat there for a while, just listening to the water rush. She broke the silence and said, "I never imagined I'd fall for the guy who came to fix my garage lights." I laughed. "And I never thought the woman in that fancy house would ask me to come back." She smiled, her eyes soft. "Well, you're not just the electrician anymore." I didn't say anything back. I just pressed a kiss to her temple and held her a little closer, because she was right. I'm still Steve, still 25, still figuring out life, one job, one bill, one step at a time. But now I've got someone who sees me, not just for the work I do, but for who I am. And maybe that's the heart of the story. Not some cliche about a rich girl and a working-class guy, not the Porsche or the picnic or even the kisses, but two people from completely different worlds choosing to build something new together. It's not perfect, not some grand, dramatic saga, just real, messy, human connection.